We live surrounded by endless streams of data and more advanced degrees than at any point in human history. Yet we still see highly irrational, completely foolish behavior every single day. Society typically defines this behavior using static metrics, like a low IQ score, a poor vocabulary, or a lack of formal education. Psychological research shows these metrics are only part of the story, as high intellect and advanced degrees offer no inherent immunity against poor decision-making. Stupidity is better understood as a collection of correctable, low-level cognitive habits. These habits link together to form a self-inflicted cycle, effectively trapping the brain in a state of permanent ignorance. Because this is a behavioral loop and not an inherited genetic trait, even a certified genius can operate like a complete idiot without ever realizing it. To see how this cycle functions, we have to look at the starting point of all human intelligence, curiosity, and the willingness to ask questions. The loop begins with an input failure. The moment the mind decides it is uncomfortable with the feeling of not knowing, it actively shuts down its exploratory engine. Without an influx of new information, a processing error occurs. Because the stagnant mind refuses to seek out fresh nuance, it has to aggressively force all complex issues through a harsh, rigid filter. This filtering reduces deep, layered problems into meaningless slogans, or what people call common sense. The thought process starts relying entirely on extreme, black-and-white thinking, turning rich data into identical gray blocks. A healthy mind thrives on depth, scale, and the friction that comes from conflicting ideas. Instead of growing to meet the world's complexity, the stagnant mind shrinks its own reality to fit its limited processing power. What happens when a mind running entirely on aggressively oversimplified data tries to interact with the real world? This creates step 3, the output. The individual develops an illusion of extreme certainty, allowing them to speak on highly complex topics with total, unearned confidence. True competence requires the self-awareness to recognize your own knowledge gaps. Intelligent minds naturally question their own conclusions. When this overly certain mind is confronted by undeniable, conflicting evidence, it repels the new information to keep its worldview intact. Instead of adapting, the mind engages a defense mechanism known as cognitive rigidity. Cognitive rigidity is a psychological condition where an individual becomes unable to adapt their beliefs to new information, causing them to treat changing an opinion as a weakness. To protect the ego from the hard work of self-reflection, a final fail-safe triggers. The mind shifts all blame externally, pointing the finger at society, bosses, or the system. The loop is now completely locked. The individual remains stagnant, all while falsely believing they are intellectually superior. In this context, stupid is less a childish insult and more an accurate clinical diagnosis of a closed cognitive system. A mind trapped inside this loop is incapable of evolution, no matter how much raw data it manages to memorize. But there is a counter-narrative here. Because stupidity is a learned pattern of rigid certainty, constant outward blame, and extreme oversimplification, it is entirely curable. To shatter this armor, you have to take one specific, deeply uncomfortable action. You must consciously admit that you might be wrong. This deliberate act of self-doubt requires immense effort and metacognition. Metacognition is the process of thinking critically about your own thought patterns. It is the exact effort a stagnant mind avoids. True intelligence is never measured by your absolute certainty. It is measured by your continuous willingness to let your beliefs evolve.